how you can create the perfect look for your villain. What does it take? What do you need to do as a writer to create a villain that is going to stand the test of time? One that is going to make the reader want to turn the page to the very end, find out what's going to happen next. We're going to be answering those questions and more, and we're starting right now. It's been said that all great stories come down to the villain. It's the villain that makes the story. Think about the movie Jaws. Imagine if it was a barracuda instead of a great white. We wouldn't want to watch that movie. The greater the villain, the more we fear for the protagonist, and that is what makes us turn the page. Dan Brown, who writes Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code, said that he thinks of the villain first. It is the villain that he comes up with, and then he creates the story around that villain. Stephen King even says that he comes up with the monster. He comes up with the problem. And then he creates average, everyday people who you can relate to, who now has to deal with that monster. Because Stephen King knows that when you create a very powerful monster that people fear, that is what's going to make them want to read to the end, to find out how these average, everyday protagonists is going to stop something big and evil as the monster that he has come up with. But think about every great villain that you have ever read in a book or seen in a movie. What's the one thing that you notice most about them? Chances are their look does not change. Darth Vader looked the same throughout all three movies. He did not change his appearance. When you watch a James Bond movie, his villains pretty much always look the same throughout the movie. Great villains keep their look from the start to the finish, to a point where kids can even dress up like them on Halloween. As a writer, when you create a villain, you want to ask yourself, what do they look like? What clothes do they wear? What is unique about their appearance that's going to last throughout the novel? Because great villains seem to be almost cartoonist-like. They seem to have the same look throughout the entire story. So as a writer, you want to use this to your advantage. How can you create a look that people are going to connect and remember with your villain from the beginning to the end? You don't want to just create something very unique and plain that's boring and forgettable. As a writer, you want to come up with something unique that's going to make that villain stand out in the mind of the reader, something that they're going to remember. Maybe it's something about their hair, their clothes, something that they carry, even something like you look at Jack the Ripper. We have no idea who he was or what he looked like, but yet for some reason, we always think about him wearing the black cloak with the top hat, with the medicine bag. It's something that people envision in their mind. Movies have been made about Jack the Ripper, showing him with this appearance. And we always picture him having that same look in all the movies and all the books that have ever been written. There's something about villains that have a unique look to them that makes them memorable. Chances are, if you think about a villain in a book that you read, you're going to, and if that villain's look keeps changing from chapter to chapter, chances are that villain is someone you're not going to remember. They're going to come and go out of your mind. But if the villain keeps the same look from the beginning to the end, all of a sudden you can't help but remember them. Even years down the road, when you think of that book, you think of the villain because they always had that same look to them that never changed. As a writer, you can use this to your advantage. Always remember to make your villain bigger and stronger than your protagonist. You don't want to have a villain who is weak, who is boring. Your villain has to be driven. They have to have a goal, something that they're after, something that nothing is going to stop them. Your villain is smarter, have more resources. Think about how the Empire in Star Wars was bigger and stronger than the Rebellion. This made us fear them. This made us want to watch the movie until the end to see how the rebellion is going to stop this big bad empire. You want to do the same thing with your character. You want to make your characters, your villain, bigger and stronger than your protagonist. This is going to make someone reading your book fear and wonder for your protagonist. Will they be okay? Will they be safe? Will they survive until the end? It doesn't matter if you're writing a drama or a comedy or a science fiction. Always make sure that the protagonist, make sure that the antagonist is bigger and stronger than the protagonist. This is going to make the person reading your book want to read until the very end. This idea of creating a villain who has a certain look to them, this is not new. Even when you go back to look at Charles Dickens novels written hundreds of years ago, the villains always seem to keep their same look. They seem to dress and act the same throughout the entire book. William Shakespeare did the same thing. His villains always seem to keep the same look. So this isn't something that's new to us. This is something that has gone back throughout time. Chances are, when you think of some of the greatest villains throughout the history of novels, you end up thinking of a villain who has the same unique look to them from start to finish. As a writer, you can use this to your advantage. And remember, it's not just their clothes that you're looking for. It's every little detail. How do they speak? How do they walk? What are their interests and hobbies? What little things you can add to your villain that makes them unique? Something that makes them stand out from the crowd. Those little things that you can add to your villain in terms of how they walk, how they speak, how they dress, how they act. These little things that you can add makes them stand out and makes them rememberable throughout time. All I have to do is ask you to think about Dracula. Here is a character that was written hundreds of years ago. But as soon as I say the name Dracula, you know instantly what to picture in your mind. You know what Dracula looks like. You know the way he talks, the way he moves, his hair, the suit that he wears, what Dracula's interest, how he wants the night instead of the day, living in a castle. Everything about Dracula comes to mind with me just saying the name alone. Because Dracula has become so famous even after hundreds of years later, because his look always remains the same. If Dracula's appearance kept changing chapter after chapter, chances are we wouldn't remember him. He would be forgotten. But because we remember, it's because his look stays the same, we remember him. It is those little things about Dracula that come to mind. Imagine if you created a character who hundreds of years from now, kids dress up like on Halloween. People imitate. People write about. Movies are made about your villain. Try to create a character that is going to stand the test of time, just like how Dracula is remembered even today. Ask yourself, what does your villain want? What is their goal? Their goal can be something major like taking over the world, or just wanting to steal money like Hans Gruber did in Die Hard. But when you think of Hans Gruber, you hear his voice in your head. You can picture his suit and tie. Everything about Hans Gruber is rememberable from the movie Die Hard because his look remained the same throughout the movie. The way he talked, the way he acted, what his goals, what his ambitions were, they always remain the same throughout the movie, which is why you can picture him in your mind with just simply hearing his name. As a writer, you want to ask yourself, what does my villain want? What is their end game? And what unique look can I give them that's going to stay with them until the beginning to the end, to a point where someone can remember your villain years later after reading your book. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my website, where I have a tremendous amount of information that will help you become the greatest writer you can be. In fact, I'm going to leave a link to my website in the description down below, so you can visit my website right now and become the greatest writer you can be. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my next video on why Stephen King is not a horror writer. If he's not, then what is he? Be sure to watch that next video and find out. In fact, I'm going to leave a link to that video right here, and you can click on it right now and start watching.